This video was scripted prior to the release of Bungie's Codename Frontiers blog posts. Some changes were made, however the reveal has had minimal impact on the video as a whole. The end of a 10-year-long saga, Destiny 2 The Final Shape launched to praise from fans alongside widespread critical acclaim. Despite this unquestionable success, not only did Bungie proceed with another wave of staff layoffs, but in both player count and viewership metrics, Destiny 2 continues to decline. In some ways, Final Shape has managed to outperform Lightfall, whose release preceded the biggest fall-off and loss of player trust in the game's lifetime. The story of the Final Shape is best told from the start. After Lightfall's comparatively late release, due to Witch Queen's delay, the Final Shape was revealed in the normal reveal window on August 23rd, 2023, around 6 months after Lightfall's launch and 6 months before its original planned release date of February 2nd, 2024. Bungie revealed very little about the expansion's content, expanding narrowly on the story, showing very small snippets of the destination and a pre-rendered cinematic trailer, and of course, the return of Nathan Fillion as Cade 6. However, this had been previously announced in May, months before the expansion's reveal. Despite the limited information, initial reactions to the reveal were a mix of positive thoughts and reserved expectations. With the disappointment of Lightfall so fresh in the mind, players held off on pre-orders, resulting in Bungie majorly missing their internal targets, which would be later used as an explanation for their first round of staff layoffs. In October 2023, approximately 3 months before the planned launch of Final Shape, Bungie announced a round of internal layoffs, with leakers expanding this story to include a delay of the launch date due to a combination of major gameplay additions and reduced manpower. After about 2 weeks of speculation, Bungie officially confirmed the delay in early November 2023 through a blog post. Alongside this announcement came the announcement of Into the Light, a free-to-play update that would release in early April 2024 to give players new content to play in the content void the delay had created. No further details were given, and what had originally been a normal 3-month season became Destiny's longest ever period between major content drops of 7 months. As an unattended side effect, or calculated risk, Bungie had raised the stakes for Final Shape even further by extending a period in which player retention and social media viewership were in decline. After months of silence and minimal updates to the game aside from limited time events, Bungie finally announced the content that would be released in Into the Light across 3 live streams in March 2024. The content ended up being recycled assets with reskins and/or new game modes or mechanics. Despite previous sentiment towards recycled content, such as Shadowkeep, the volume of the content alongside the free price tag led to the live streams being well received and interest in the game beginning to return. Destiny experienced its biggest player spike since the launch of Lightfall, with Steam charts recording a 20,000 player increase during April. As content continued to be released, player counts continued to increase throughout May. As the month progressed and Final Shape drew closer, community sentiment and excitement began to increase significantly. This was heavily assisted by the reveal of more gameplay in a livestream hosted on April 10th. In this livestream, Bungie unveiled a plethora of new gameplay mechanics, story details, and a new enemy faction. The reveal seemed to reassure the community that the delay had been used effectively and the expansion would launch in a finished, polished state. As predicted and extensively memed, the technical dimension of Final Shape at launch was a categorical failure. Despite 27 hours of downtime, the launch was delayed by an hour due to issues getting the servers back online, only for players to receive endless error codes once they were able to get into the game. It became common for players to be kicked from the game mid-mission and returned to the incredibly long queue. Once the technical issues subsided, the campaign was classed as a major success, with the story being well received and gameplay mechanics feeling fresh and engaging to players. Unlike Lightfall, the harder Legendary mode felt challenging yet not impossible, and created a worthwhile challenge that was well rewarded without majorly impacting the endgame. Clocking in at about 5 hours for a non-stop cover-to-cover playthrough, players were initially slightly disappointed at the runtime of the conclusion of Destiny's 10-year story arc. This was, however, not all the story content part of the campaign, with 2 exotic quest lines having heavy story content included in the Final Shape questline, which pleasantly surprised players, extending the runtime of the main campaign. Not only that, but the raid and an unknown activity to launch after it were also included in the narrative of the expansion. For the first time since Destiny 1's Taken King expansion, the narrative of the expansion extended beyond the campaign and into the raid without needing to delve into lore books, exciting players and creating a new expectation of potentially the hardest raid in Destiny history to come. Upon completion of all launch day content, the storyline of the expansion was unresolved and continued with the launch of the Salvation's Edge raid and Excision activity. With the entire saga on the line, Bungie opened the doors to the biggest raid race Destiny has ever experienced. Twitch viewership during the raid race soared to over 475,000 people throughout most of its first 24 hours. Viewership continued to be incredibly high after the 24-hour mark, mainly due to only one team completing the raid in its first day. Upon completion of World's First, Excision launched, and players faced off in one final showdown with the Witness in the first ever and potentially last 12-man activity. With both the raid and Excision now available and completed, the story had officially finished, and the thoughts on the expansion and its narrative began to roll in. Upon completion of all content in the Final Shape, thoughts and hopes were high amongst the community, with reviews coming in strong and community discussion praising Bungie's storytelling. Whilst a player drop-off was to be expected as story content wrapped up and the game transitioned into the new endgame gameplay loop, the drop-off was severe. Steam charts recorded a 50% drop in average players between June and July. Streamers began to sink their teeth into the new gameplay mechanics and the new episode story structure, which could be marked as the turning point for Final Shape. With a loss of direction thanks to the wrap-up of an entire story arc, there was a tangible confusion from both players and in the game itself as to what came next. Bungie attempted to combat this sentiment with another live stream unveiling all content that would be released across the next year. However, this was met with mixed feelings. After years of self-contained but connected storylines as each season led directly into another, it was jarring for players to transition instantly into standalone stories that seemed to be disconnected from each other, especially with many plotlines seemingly left forgotten after Final Shape's conclusion. Reflection on conversations and feedback prior to the launch determined that Final Shape was considered a story expansion by players, with only a relatively small portion of the fanbase getting major consideration to post-raid gameplay content. This does explain how the expansion was considered a major success by players, while simultaneously experiencing a catastrophic player fall-off. Given this major emphasis being put on the story aspects of the release, Episode 1 Echoes, exploring the immediate fallout of Final Shape, needed to be enticing and engaging to draw players back into a new, unfamiliar storyline. Essentially, the game had started from scratch again, with no mention so far of existing antagonists such as the Wrath, and the only connection to past storylines being a handful of returning supporting characters. When we look at previous releases since Shadowkeep, each seasonal and expansion story has led directly into another, particularly in recent years. During the year of Lightfall is when these links were at their strongest. Season of Defiance acted as an epilogue to Lightfall's story. Then Season of the Deep began the build-up to the Final Shape, with its conclusion directly kicking off Season of the Witch, where the plot for Season of the Wish was directly created as part of the natural story progression. Even in earlier years, this flow-through was present, however not as strong. Season of the Risen tied directly into Witch Queen, with Season of the Haunted setting up Lightfall's main antagonist, and Season of Plunder and Season of the Seraph building to the opening of Lightfall, establishing the alliances instrumental to the storylines that followed. The lack of connection felt by players is likely a key reason for the game's fall-off. This theory is supported by considering the context each previous expansion launched in. From Shadowkeep onwards, Bungie has built up the Black Fleet story arc, with most expansions, seasons, and lore entries building the Witness as a character, the Collapse as an event, and key characters central to the story arc. Although the quality of the storytelling in Final Shape can be considered top-notch, each previous expansion, even if disappointing, left a part of the story still to be told. Due to Final Shape's nature, all story elements involved in the Light and Darkness saga were wrapped up, leaving no element of mystery behind. It was initially hoped that Echoes would revive these elements, acting as an epilogue for Final Shape and the beginning of a prologue for what is to come. But these storytelling elements seem absent in Echoes, with the focus immediately shifting to building new characters with very minimal involvement of pivotal characters in the Final Shape. Further compounding this issue is a lack of direction with minimal details about after Episode 3 other than project code names and a new expansion format. Matters were made worse when Bungie announced another round of layoffs on July 31st, this time on an even bigger scale. Affecting roughly 17% of their workforce, initial confusion ran rampant as every indicator suggested Final Shape should have been a major financial success for Bungie. The confusion was turned to concern upon the release of a blog post authored by CEO Pete Parsons later that day, revealing that accompanying the layoffs, Bungie seemed to be conducting a complete reassessment and reconstruction of their business plans, resulting in cancelled or reassigned projects and hints that Destiny's expansion model would be drastically changed. The perfect storm had formed, and faith in Bungie was plummeting at a faster rate than ever before. As the dust settled, focus began to shift towards the continuing story of Echoes as Act 2 launched to neutral reactions. Nothing spectacular occurring, but also nothing majorly concerning for the future of Destiny's story. As Act 3 approached, and Bungie's normal announcement period of August passed by, concern rose again. Rumours were circulating that Bungie would never again create a major expansion for Destiny, shifting towards content releases similar to Into the Light. At this point, there was no way around it. Destiny as a franchise has hit critical condition. As mentioned, during the production of this video, Bungie announced the new content model Destiny would adopt after Episode 3. Whilst not entirely scrapping major expansions, the size of each expansion will be smaller, but the frequency will be increased. As the suite of other changes were also announced, some concerns amongst players have been eased. However, in their place, new concerns have risen, with only concepts being revealed and no actual implementations being shown as of yet. Alongside 2 expansions per year, Destiny is also going to receive 2 major updates per year, free to play for all players. These will launch 3 months after each expansion. The size of these updates has been likened to Into the Light, providing promise. However, due to no reveal of any planned content, there is still some reason for concern. Only time will tell how Destiny will fare leading into the future, and how the current plans changes will affect the game. However, a lack of direction and distrust in Bungie's leadership have left a monumental challenge ahead. What was initially seeming like Destiny's golden child has quickly become one of the biggest challenges the game has faced in recent years.